is on ESPN. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing, lads?
We were at that game just now. Look, the Fever have been on a tear. They've won 2 in a row, a 25-point blowout of the Lynx in the Commissioner's Cup final. And
the Fever have been on a tear. They've won 2 in a row. Against, in fairness, an imploding team and a lottery team. And by the way, we all know how much better the Wings are with or without Enrique. With Enrique, the only reason we won that game is because they put Enrique on.
It finally happened again. ESPN has once again targeted Caitlin Clark with one of the laziest narratives in modern sports commentary. After the Indiana Fever won 2 games without her, commentators leapt to suggest the team is more dangerous without Clark. But when the numbers are put under a microscope, the entire claim crumbles. This isn't about wins and losses, it's about controlling a narrative, silencing a rising star, and bending facts to suit old biases. And make no mistake, this isn't just bad analysis. It's part of a bigger media pattern to marginalize the most popular player in women's basketball.
Like the Indiana Fever without Caitlin Clark. They had 81 last night. At 81. They are averaging, other than against the Wings who don't run back on defense. And by the way, this is the Nalissa Smith Wings, the Enrique Wings. This is the bad Wings. They put up 75 on the pathetic Sparks. With Caitlin Clark, they had 94. And by the way, the only reason they lost to the Aces with Caitlin Clark was because Stephanie White kept doing her BS, we're slowing the game down, instead of we're trying to go win by 30. When we get a bit of a lead early, we're trying to win by 30.
It started as a whisper. Then it grew into a headline. Suddenly, it became a narrative so absurd it barely needed debunking. But here we are. ESPN yet again threw Caitlin Clark under the bus, claiming the Indiana Fever might be more dangerous when she's off the court. This time, it wasn't just a clickbait tweet or anonymous quote. It came from one of the network's own analysts, Carolyn Peck in national television, just hours after the Fever managed back-to-back wins without Clark in the lineup. Now let's get one thing straight. The Indiana Fever did win 2 games without Clark. That part is true. But the opponents? A crumbling Las Vegas Aces squad and a lottery-bound Dallas Wings, both teams in chaos and missing key players. The wins were less about brilliance and more about catching vulnerable teams at the right time. And yet, ESPN immediately weaponized the moment. Rather than analyzing the full context, they pushed a narrative that Clark was somehow the problem. Peck's comments suggested the Fever were more dangerous without Clark, praising their ability to play faster and use more weapons on offense. But that theory quickly falls apart with even a basic review of the data. Without Clark, the Fever have consistently scored fewer points per game. With Clark on the court, Indiana averages 10 more points, has a better pace rating, and creates more spacing on offense. And when she plays, opposing defenses are forced to stretch further out, opening up space for players like Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston to thrive. So, where's this more dangerous idea coming from? It's not rooted in data. It's not based on strategy. It's rooted in narrative, a desire to manufacture drama. And Clark, whether she likes it or not, is now the lightning rod for every hot take in women's basketball. Let's be clear. No one said the Aces were better without Aja Wilson when they lost without her. No one said the Lynx were scarier without Nafisa Collier. But somehow, when Clark sits out and Indiana wins 2 low-stakes games, it's open season. That double standard should make every viewer pause. This isn't about basketball. It's about undermining the new face of the league. And this kind of spin is dangerous. It creates division. It misleads casual fans. It gives fuel to Clark's critics. And worst of all, it distracts from the real issues the Fever face, like inconsistent coaching, defensive lapses, and poor roster balance. Blaming the rookie who leads the team in assists, draws the most defensive pressure, and has consistently elevated the franchise's profile is not just lazy, it's toxic. What's even more frustrating is that these narratives never seem to die. They pop up every time Clark misses a game or has a cold shooting night. It's as if there's a race among commentators to be the first to declare that she's overrated or unnecessary. And ESPN's latest segment was a masterclass in how to manipulate a storyline, ignore opponent strength, skip the defensive stats, forget the season-long trends, and focus entirely on a 2-game sample. This isn't how elite athletes are typically treated. But Clark isn't being judged like a typical rookie. She's being held to a completely different standard, one reserved only for stars who change the game too quickly for comfort. Even within the Fever organization, you can see the disconnect. When Clark plays, the team is clearly more watchable, more dangerous, and more competitive. She stretches the floor, she passes into tight windows. She draws defenders away from Boston and Mitchell. Her impact goes far beyond the box score. But to ESPN, those intangibles are irrelevant. They needed a headline. They got one, and Clark paid the price. What this shows is a dangerous trend in sports media, the obsession with controversy over clarity and drama over development. Clark's journey should be about growth, leadership, and adapting to the WNBA. Instead, she's stuck fending off bad faith narratives from networks that benefit from her name, while simultaneously trying to undermine her every move. The truth is simple. The Indiana Fever are not better without Caitlin Clark. They're barely functional without her, and every fan who watches the games knows it. The only ones who don't are the ones chasing clout with a storyline that sells.
It's a change in mentality the team has had, and it's a change in tactics, it's a change in philosophy that they're trying to blitz teams and not just win games. And that they can do that with or without Caitlin Clark. But they're clearly not more dangerous. Why? Because they average 10 points per game less when she doesn't play. 10. It's not something small. It is literally 10 points per game.
It's easy to craft a narrative with isolated anecdotes, but when you zoom out and look at the data across an entire season, the truth becomes undeniable. Caitlin Clark makes the Indiana Fever better. Offensively, defensively, in transition, in pace, in spacing, in fan engagement, and most importantly, in wins. Let's start with the basics. The Fever average 10 more points per game when Clark is on the floor compared to when she sits. That stat alone should end the conversation, but it's just the beginning. Clark leads the team in assists by a significant margin and creates more points per possession through her passing than any other player in the lineup. She doesn't just score, she facilitates the entire offense. Kelsey Mitchell and Aaliyah Boston consistently benefit from the attention Clark draws, often finding themselves with cleaner looks or single coverage because of her gravitational pull. Take effective field goal percentage, EFG percent for example. With Clark on the court, the team's EFG percent is notably higher. That's not because she's padding her own stats, it's because her presence warps defensive schemes. Teams hedge harder, defenders over-rotate, closeouts become riskier. Even when she's not shooting, Clark is impacting the game. On defense, critics often cite her lateral quickness or foot speed as limitations. But this criticism lacks context. First, Clark leads the team in steals. That speaks to her anticipation, her hands, and her instincts. Second, her defensive rating, while not elite, is on par with or better than several other guards who never receive this level of scrutiny. Kelsey Mitchell, for instance, routinely gets cooked on straight-line drives. Where's the outrage there? In fact, when looking at team defensive efficiency, Indiana's best stretches have come when Clark is playing within a system that emphasizes ball pressure and fast transitions. She's not a lockdown defender, but she isn't a liability either. And when paired with a more defensive-minded backcourt mate, her weaknesses become manageable. The problem isn't Clark's roster construction, but here's where the numbers really blow up the narrative. When Clark is on the floor, Indiana's pace skyrockets. That's right, the very thing critics claim Clark slows down is actually faster with her in the lineup. The team gets into sets more quickly, they run in transition more frequently. Her outlet passes are often the spark for fast breaks. She is not bogging down the offense, she's accelerating it. This all aligns with another powerful metric, plus, minus. While not always the most precise stat, Clark's on-off differential is stark. The Fever consistently play better when she's in the game. They rebound better, they shoot better, they move the ball more. And yet, none of these facts seem to matter to those pushing the anti-Clark narrative. Why? Because they're not looking at the numbers. They're looking for sound bites. ESPN's take wasn't based on analytical rigor, it was based on vibes, narrative momentum, and an all-too-familiar disdain for a player who challenges the league's status quo. Even deeper stats reinforce her value. According to Synergy Sports, Clark is in the top percentile for pick-and-roll ball handlers and creating scoring opportunities for others. Her points created per possession are elite for a rookie, especially one shouldering the bulk of the offensive initiation. And her usage rate? It's high but not irresponsibly so. She's being asked to do a lot because no one else on the team can replicate her impact. The argument that the Fever share the ball better without Clark also falls apart. When she's out, their assists drop, their offensive rating plummets, and turnovers actually increase as the ball gets stuck in isolation sets or rush decisions. This myth that Clark monopolizes possessions is contradicted by the fact that she consistently ranks among league leaders in secondary assists, meaning she's setting up the person who gets the assist. That's basketball IQ. That's unselfishness. Now let's look at spacing. Clark's threat as a shooter, even when she's cold, forces defenders to pick her up near half court. That spreads the floor for everyone. It opens up driving lanes. It stretches defenses in ways few players in the league can. Without her, those lanes collapse. Shooters have less time. Post players get doubled. The offense contracts. All of this points to one conclusion. Caitlin Clark is a net positive. The data says it. The eye test confirms it. The wins with her on the floor back it up. There is no credible statistical foundation for claiming Indiana is better without her. So why does this myth persist? Because some commentators are more interested in sensationalism than truth. And because Clark, as the league's most polarizing figure, is a magnet for scrutiny no matter how inaccurate. But for those willing to look at the numbers, the story is clear. Clark is not just helping the Fever, she's carrying them.
We are not surprised. Anything to diminish and downplay Caitlin Clark. Now, what I will say with Carolyn Peck, she must have watched that clip before hopping, because she used the same net ratings, efficiency, and when I dive into the numbers, let's take a look, right? Let's take a look. This the Indiana Fever with and without Caitlin Clark. First 4 games of the season, net rating 11.9. Without Caitlin Clark, net rating drops to 2.6. Ooh.
Turn on ESPN, scroll through social media, or skim any major sports outlet these days, and you'll notice a pattern. When Caitlin Clark has an off night, it's headline news. When the Indiana Fever win without her, it's a so-called revelation. When she responds to an elbow with composure, it becomes a debate over her toughness. This isn't journalism, it's controversy theater. And Clark, whether she asked for it or not, is the central character in the media's latest obsession with manufactured drama. Let's call it what it is, a modern-day media gold rush. Ever since Caitlin Clark burst into national prominence with a record-shattering college career, every outlet has scrambled to profit off her name. She's a trending topic magnet. Mention her in a tweet and engagement surges. Add her name to a headline and your article gets twice the clicks. The media doesn't just cover Caitlin Clark, they feed off her. And when the headlines are positive, that only goes so far. Positive press fades. Fans nod and move on. But controversy? That sticks. Controversy spreads. It becomes podcast fodder, morning debate material, and TikTok think pieces. So when Clark does anything that could possibly be twisted into a hot take, the media pounces. They inflate the moment, strip away context, and present it as a "what does this mean?" spectacle. Take for example the recent "more dangerous without Clark" narrative. ESPN didn't just report it, they ran with it. They brought it up multiple times across segments, invited discussion panels, and encouraged back and forth debate between talking heads. It didn't matter that the take had no statistical backing. What mattered was that it sparked engagement. And the casualty? Clark's reputation. This obsession with drama isn't unique to Clark, of course, but what makes her case stand out is the volume and frequency. Other rookies are allowed to develop. They're permitted off nights. Clark? She's under the microscope 24/7. Every bad pass becomes a sign of arrogance. Every missed shot becomes a symbol of failure. And if her team happens to lose? Well, cue the think pieces about her fit and impact. This approach also fuels a deeper, more troubling narrative that Clark is somehow disrupting the WNBA's culture, that she hasn't earned her status, that she's being handed attention instead of earning it. And because the media refuses to challenge this idea, it takes on a life of its own. It becomes canon. Suddenly, fans who've never watched a full game feel confident dismissing her as a media creation. What's most galling is how rarely these narratives get corrected. When Clark leads a comeback win, crickets. When her defense improves, silence. When she carries a struggling team on her back, a quick mention, then back to the usual scrutiny. The media has set the tone. Praise is a whisper, criticism is a bullhorn. Let's be clear, this kind of media environment isn't just annoying, it's dangerous. It creates division within fan bases. It fosters resentment among players, and it discourages honest storytelling. When everything becomes about friction and spectacle, there's no room left to celebrate growth, resilience, or leadership. Clark's rise should be one of the most inspiring stories in modern basketball. A young woman turning heads, rewriting records, and bringing in millions of new fans. But instead, she's become a flashpoint. Not because of what she's done wrong, but because of what she represents a threat to the old order. And for a media ecosystem built on conflict, that's the perfect storm. What's particularly disappointing is how many seasoned analysts fall into this trap. Instead of using their platforms to elevate the game or provide nuance, they chase the algorithm. They trade integrity for impressions, they know better, and they choose clicks over truth. But fans aren't stupid. The numbers are out there. The footage doesn't lie. Clark's impact is visible to anyone watching with a clear lens. And the more the media tries to manufacture drama, the more disconnected they become from the people actually watching the games. The solution? It starts with accountability. Networks like ESPN need to reassess how they cover rising stars. They need to separate fair critique from clickbait. They need to remember that behind every viral headline is a real player navigating real pressure. Until then, the manufactured drama will continue. Clark will remain the centerpiece of a media circus she didn't sign up for. And the WNBA will suffer not because of her presence, but because of how poorly her presence is being handled. In sports, as in life, not all criticism is created equal. For years, star players in the WNBA have been afforded grace, patience, and space to grow. But when it comes to Caitlin Clark, it seems every missed shot is a referendum, and every setback is weaponized. This isn't just about coverage, it's about double standards, and the hypocrisy is glaring. Let's examine the case of A'ja Wilson, a proven superstar and one of the most dominant players in the league. When the aces stumble even when Wilson plays poorly, narrative rarely shifts to blame. Analysts focus on team chemistry, scheduling fatigue, or coaching decisions. Breanna Stewart? If the Liberty struggle, the blame disperses. She needs more help. It's a growing phase. Let's wait and see. That's how it should be. But for Clark, the tone is never that generous. The recent ESPN segment claiming the Fever were better without her is a prime example of how selective the media's respect truly is. No one claimed the Aces were better without Wilson during her absence. No one suggested that the Lynx should sit Nafisa Collier after a loss. But the moment Clark misses 2 games and the Fever beat 2 underwhelming teams, the discussion isn't about team growth. It's about whether Clark is the problem. Why is Clark judged so differently? Part of it stems from her fame. She entered the league with massive attention, fanfare, and expectations, but so did others. Diana Taurasi was a walking headline in her prime. Candace Parker carried an entire generation of visibility. The difference is that the media today doesn't just cover Clark, they challenge her right to be in the spotlight. This selective scrutiny isn't just a media issue, it echoes in player commentary too. When veterans question Clark's presence or claim she hasn't earned it, those statements are often amplified by networks hungry for conflict. Instead of checking those narratives or adding nuance, ESPN broadcasts them uncritically, giving them legitimacy. And by doing so, they create a hostile environment for one of the league's brightest stars. Consider how Kelsey Plum is covered. When she has an off night or struggles on defense, the coverage often points to effort, fatigue, or system issues. Clark doesn't get the same benefit of the doubt. Her defense? Picked apart, play by play. Her turnovers? Used to question her court IQ. It's as if she's expected to be perfect immediately or be labeled a liability. Even in how Clark's positive impact is framed, the language is different. When she leads and assists, it's downplayed as expected. When she hits logo threes, it's treated as flashy rather than strategic. Meanwhile, other stars making the same plays are praised for their leadership, court vision, or clutch instincts. This selective respect has a cost. It sets an impossible standard for Clark to meet. It sows division among fans, and it fosters resentment within the league, as narratives distort how players view each other. It also disrespects the very audience driving the league's growth. Clark's supporters see through the bias. They recognize that the same analyst tearing her down once begged for a moment like this when women's basketball was finally at the center of the national sports conversation. Let's not pretend this isn't also about control. Clark represents a shift in power. She brings new fans, new money, and new media attention. And for some, that's threatening. She didn't rise through the old guard system. She didn't pay dues the way others did. She exploded onto the scene and instantly became the face of the league. That kind of disruption always brings backlash. But make no mistake, fans aren't confused. They're watching. They see the inconsistencies. They see how Clark gets criticized for things others get praised for. They notice when broadcasters hold her to impossible standards while excusing their favorites. And that disconnect is eroding trust not just in the media, but in the league's ability to nurture its most valuable assets. If the WNBA wants to thrive, it needs to confront these double standards head-on. The media must be held accountable. Players must be challenged when they contribute to toxic narratives. And rising stars like Clark must be allowed to grow without being smothered by unrealistic expectations. Until then, the double standard will persist. Respect will remain selective. And Clark will continue to carry a burden far heavier than her jersey suggests not just the weight of a franchise, but the weight of a league still deciding how much greatness it's willing to tolerate from someone who didn't follow the traditional script. With every headline questioning her value and every analyst feeding a false narrative, you might expect Caitlin Clark to lash out, to call out her critics, to set the record straight in some explosive post-game rant. But that's not her style. Instead, Clark does what she's always plays. She grits her teeth, steps on the court, and reminds everyone why she's the most electric name in the WNBA. While the media churns out hot takes, Clark has kept her head down. She hasn't fired back. She hasn't stormed off in protest. Her response has come entirely through her game. Whether it's a no-look dime to Aaliyah Boston, a 30-foot logo three, or a late-game assist to seal a win, Clark's message has been loud and clear. Talk all you want, I'll keep working. And it's not just about highlight plays. Clark's composure under pressure has become one of her defining traits. Opponents have tried to rattle her with physical play, trash talk, and off-ball bumps. Refs have missed blatant calls. Teammates have sometimes looked lost. Yet Clark rarely loses her cool. She reads the floor, makes the right pass, and adapts. That kind of mental toughness doesn't show up on a stat sheet, but it changes games. Her improvement since the start of the season is undeniable. Early on, she struggled with turnovers and defensive rotations. That's normal for any rookie adjusting to WNBA speed and size. But unlike most rookies, every mistake she made was broadcast, dissected, and framed as evidence that she was overrated. Clark didn't respond with excuses. She responded with growth. Her turnover rate has dropped, her decision-making has sharpened, and her impact on both ends of the court has expanded. She's also leading by example in other ways. Despite being the most recognizable player in the league, Clark constantly praises her teammates, deflects attention, and focuses on team goals. She's never demanded special treatment. She's never used her fame to throw her weight around. When wins come, she spreads the credit. When losses sting, she takes accountability. That maturity is rare, and it's something many of her critics conveniently ignore. The truth is, Clark could have easily weaponized her popularity. She could have gone on social media tirades. She could have clapped back at ESPN on live television. She could have pulled endorsements or refused interviews. But she didn't, because she understands that the real answer isn't in what you say it's in, how you play. This restraint, though, shouldn't be mistaken for weakness. In fact, it's one of Clark's greatest strengths. She's building something bigger than her self-credibility, legacy, leadership. She knows the spotlight won't always be kind. She knows the pressure will keep mounting, but she also knows that performance silences everything. Even her fiercest critics can't deny her impact. Game after game, Clark draws the biggest crowds, the highest ratings, and the loudest cheers. She moves merchandise, sells out arenas, and drives digital traffic. But beyond all that, she inspires. She makes people care. She makes young girls believe they can hit those threes too, lead a team too, fight through noise too. Her ability to block out distractions is especially impressive when you consider how few veterans have had her back publicly. While a few teammates and coaches have spoken up, much of the WNBA establishment has stayed silent or worse, contributed to the pile-on. And yet, Clark hasn't flinched. She hasn't fed the drama. She's kept it professional, even when others haven't. When people say Clark isn't WNBA tough, they overlook everything she's endured. Not just the physicality, but the psychological warfare, the expectations, the narratives, the backhanded praise. And through all of it, she's kept hooping. That's toughness. That's resilience. That's the kind of leadership every team dreams of. Her focus has always been bigger than clapping back. It's been about building something sustainable for herself, for her team, and for the league. She understands that her role isn't just to score points, it's to elevate the game. And no matter how loud the noise gets, she keeps finding ways to do exactly that. In the end, Clark's silence has said more than 1,000 interviews ever could. She knows her game is louder than any ESPN panel. And she knows that in a league hungry for growth, the real revolution happens on the hardwood, not in the headlines. This isn't just a bad take from ESPN, it's part of a disturbing pattern. Clark's influence continues to rattle the old guard of women's basketball, both on and off the court. But no matter how many times the media tries to twist the story, fans know the truth. The Indiana Fever are better with Caitlin Clark, period. The numbers prove it. The performances prove it. And soon, even the narrative manipulators at ESPN won't be able to deny it. The only question now is, how long will fans put up with the gaslighting before demanding accountability?